All right, Congressman. I asked you about your old colleague, Peter King, and you also heard what his colleague in the House, Congressman Ellison, said. Who do you agree more with?
I started looking at this in 1998. I chaired the committee that looked at terrorism for 10 years. And I can't even express strongly enough that to somehow suggest that we don't have a terrorist activity that is basically motivated by Islam, to me is like saying, you know, something really stupid.
Okay, so let's say we all agree with you, okay? Then the question is, what do you do about it? Do you say that because a person subscribes to a certain faith, that they ought to have a different level of surveillance when they, let's say, they go to a mosque than when I go to a church?
Good question. I don't think you have to go that far. But if at least we can acknowledge that what we're confronting are Islamic terrorists, that's a start.
We're not get back to what we do about it.
Here's what we do about it. We put a plant, an undercover agent, in every controversial mosque in this country, and nobody's the wiser for it. What that congressman just said on the air about Italian Americans and Irish Americans, there would have been nothing in the world to prevent the FBI from putting, for example, an undercover agent at every Catholic church service in this country, and nobody would have been the wiser for it.
With what he just said?
I think it's being done now.
It is being done now.
I'd almost put my life on it that it's being done now.
Are you comfortable with it, with that going on?
I think 99% of, I believe 85% of Americans are absolutely comfortable with it. And the third time is I have absolutely no problem with it.
Now, you have been in Lower Manhattan. Time out. Dominic has been in Lower Manhattan, as I think most of us know, covering the stop and frisk hearings. They singled out a population, one could argue here. The evidence certainly shows overwhelmingly that even though 90+% of the people did nothing wrong, almost 90% of them look more like you than look like me. You got a problem with that. How come you got a problem with that, but you don't got a problem with them picking out certain houses of worship to go bug?
But whether I have a problem with stop and frisk, they're still doing it anyway. And no matter what me, you, or the congressman says, they will, even if the federal judge rules against it, they're going to find another way to do stop and frisk. And it's the same thing with the mosque. I mean, not 99% of any group are good people, but you have to go where the evidence is leading you. I mean, we can't be politically correct when bombs are blowing up.
When he says the controversial, like how I pointed you like an object, and when he says the controversial mosques, who is to decide what those are?
I don't know. But, that's part of the problem. Hopefully there's evidence that leads to those particular affiliations, whether it's a mosque or a community group or whatever, so that you get the proper infiltration.
But Congressman, I have a question for you, which is, I was on the air after 9/11, like everybody, but I opened up the phone lines, and I
must have been one young kid.
I was, yeah. It aged like, believe me, this is, but in opening up the phone lines, in addition to the reporting, you heard really interesting conversations. But I will tell you, in the days after it, the amount of people who said, "Let's round up," and they didn't know if they were saying Muslims, Arabs. No, wait, what was saying? And they said, until we're sure who's with us and who's against us, let's first segregate them in effect here, and then we'll figure it out. And I said, you ever heard about what we did to the Japanese Americans here with internment camps? No one's suggesting that now, but my point is, if we say, yeah, you know what, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, let's treat it a little differently. Isn't that a little dangerous?
Yeah, my head is spinning though, because I just start from the simple and get more complex. The bottom line is, we basically have terrorists who are motivated by their Islamic beliefs that are very extreme. You have an Islamic faith that is somewhat silent, except with some exceptions, to these activities. And I just think that we have to just be blunt with our adversaries. We know who you are, and then you just start from there.
I think that's very dangerous.
Do you know who they are, though? I mean, how do we know who they are?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you this. I work backwards. I'm not afraid of Hindu terrorists. I'm not afraid of Catholic terrorists. I'm not afraid of Protestant terrorists. I am afraid of Islamist terrorists. So I'm sorry, I am. Because
but then I get back to the same thing, even if I agree with you. What do you do about it?
Look, there's nothing unlawful about listening. There's nothing unlawful about intelligence gathering. If you're using a wiretap, you need court authorization. There is nothing in the world that prevents any undercover police officer from going anywhere in this country, be it a house of worship or otherwise,
Mark,
and sitting there and listening.
We know this story. Your kid's going on a rafting trip, okay? And this happened, right? And because they happen to come from, what was it, a college group that had Muslims in it, there was an NYPD plant with them. Not going with my kids up to Maine to summer camp, okay? That's the price of doing business in America if you pray in a different church?
Well, how do you think that the Israelis have managed to survive every day since 1948? This is what they do, and you have to reconcile democratic values with very real security threats.
Do you think we're there?
No, because of this sheen of political correctness. This is not about their faith. This is about what they are spreading and what they are saying and what they are acting on it. And as the congressman said, too few people in the community are standing up and repudiating it and saying, we don't stand for this.
Gentlemen, first of all, you're lumping every Muslim together.
No.
There are plenty of Muslims that are working and cooperating and trying to help in any way that they can and find these actions abhorrent. I would also point out we have Christian terrorists in this country who are responsible for the murders of abortion doctors in portions of this country.
And their groups are infiltrated as well.
And they are led by their own fundamentalism, and yet we don't have the same taste for getting in there and trying to stir things up.
We do have the same taste for
The FBI infiltrates those groups.
That's
the
exactly
FBI,
right.
the FBI infiltrates the KKK.
But we would never
back
say,
in the civil rights movement.
Exactly right.
The FBI, the man standing next to Malcolm X when he died was a New York City police officer.
We would never say that we should infiltrate or at least better surveil every extreme Christian group in this country. We would never have a taste for that.
Every extreme Christian group, they have a discrete agenda, which is stopping the practice of abortion that they deem abhorrent.
And murdering people and bombing clinics if need be.
The premise of jihad is to eradicate infidels and to eradicate the West and to go back to the way it was in the era of Andalusia. They want us off the face of the earth as a society, not because of anything that we believe, but because we don't believe what they believe, and they're coming out and saying
But I guess,
it's
Mark,
motive.
the only part that I find fault with is nowhere in Islam is the preached destruction of America. It's for the troubled fundamentalists here who conflate whatever they want into the destruction of America and all the other important stuff that they do.
We're infidels. Because we have a value system that is antithetical to theirs.
But now you're conflating anybody who's going to a mosque as being more risk to America than somebody's going to a church or synagogue.
If I go to a synagogue in Brooklyn where there's rampant money laundering activity among some...
That's criminal activity.
Well, preaching the overthrow of the United States, those are fighting words. They're not constitutionally protected, and that's a crime as well, because we know from World War II that words can be just as insightful as actions. So they're preaching the overthrow of this government.
So someone goes to that mosque and they listen.
And they listen.
And they say, you know what, no trouble here. They go to another mosque where the guy is breeding hate and saying, you know, we need to destroy America. You pay attention.
Yeah, agreed.
We will keep this conversation going online. Go to Facebook and Twitter and sound off. Do Boston bombings argue for increased surveillance on Muslim Americans? Really curious as to some of your answers on that. We take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to switch to a major issue that at least I was surprised how it went down just a week ago in Washington. That is on gun. Sorry, you thought you were free? Not so much. We're going to talk about that, and really, let's face it, issue doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and I want to know, from this table at least, what sealed gun control's fate. We're going to be right back with that after this.